Here, Egypt is on a date with a number of important events that will put an end to the 18th Dynasty, events that began with Thutmose III assuming the throne, where he and his sons achieved wonderful military victories, during which the Egyptian empire reached its greatest limits, before the religious revolution came, during the reign of Akhenaten, led to the outbreak of unrest and chaos, and that dynasty ended after the reign of Horemheb, who succeeded in restoring stability to the country. Stay with us in that important era of the Egyptian history that marked the end of the 18th dynasty. We are now in the era of King Thutmose III, the sixth king of the 18th dynasty, who assumed the rule of Egypt after the death of his aunt and stepmother, Hatshepsut. But he found himself facing an alliance of 100 Syrian cities against Egypt. These cities took advantage of the opportunity of the death of Queen Hatshepsut, and the young Thutmose III took over the throne to declare their rebellion against Egypt, and they separated from the Egyptian Empire and made alliances with the kingdom of Mitanni. So Thutmose III rushed to confront this alliance and clashed with them in the Battle of Megiddo to achieve a wonderful victory that made this king a legend in ancient history. And the princes of the neighboring countries began paying tribute and announcing their loyalty to Egypt. Over the years, Thutmose III carried out several campaigns, during which he invaded Syria and the lands of the kingdom of Mitanni, before turning his attention to the southern borders of Egypt to defeat the Nubians and expanding Egypt's holdings in that region, so that during his reign, Egypt reached its maximum expansion as its borders reached the Euphrates River and Syria in the east, Libya in the west, to the coasts of Phoenicia and Cyprus in the north, and to the springs of the Nile in the south, until the Fourth Cataract. Although the reign of Thutmose III was characterized by wars and invasions, this did not distract him from building important monuments, including 7 huge obelisks, a special temple for the god Amun in Karnak, and the ancestral chamber located on the southern side of the temple. He also created a funerary temple for himself, which he called the Gift of Life. Thutmose III continued to rule for 54 years and was succeeded by his son Amenhotep II, who was given the title of the Athletic King because he was a strong athlete who loved sports, especially archery. He was good at riding and handling horses, and he loved hunting. Among his hobbies is going to war, as it is an entertaining sport. Amenhotep II inherited a large empire from his father. He worked on preserving this empire and led many wars for this purpose. In the 3rd year of his reign, a rebellion broke out against him in Taxi in northern Syria. He sent an expedition there and killed 7 rebel princes. In the 7th year of his reign, Amenhotep II led a campaign to Palestine after he was informed of the outbreak of a revolution there. He subdued its princes, then seized control of it in a short period of time before crossing the river and seizing many countries and villages. Then Amenhotep II headed to the city of Kadesh, where as soon as its people knew about his presence, they went to offer him an oath of loyalty and obedience. After that, Amenhotep II headed to Elephantine and returned from it with great spoils to Egypt. In the 9th year of his rule, he sent a second campaign to northern Palestine to suppress the revolution that broke out in it, and he defeated its people in a devastating defeat. He continued his march until he reached the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia with his army. As a result of his resounding victories, the princes of Asia rushed to him carrying gifts and offering him loyalty and obedience. King Amenhotep II started taking care of the country's internal affairs after he felt satisfied with his military achievements, which brought him stability, comfort, and security throughout the Egyptian Empire. Amenhotep II died after ruling the country for 25 years, to be succeeded by his son, Thutmose IV. The sons of Amenhotep II were competing to succeed their father. Among the tricks of King Thutmose IV's rise to power, that he claimed that he saw the Sphinx in his dream and ordered him to remove the sand covering his body. In return, he will become the next king on the country's throne. And with this trick, Thutmose IV took the throne of Egypt. And this strange dream was recorded on a painting known as the Dream Painting. The princes of Syria rebelled against the new Egyptian king, so Thutmose IV launched a military campaign against northern Syria and won in it, and put down all the revolts that broke out against Egypt. He returned from this campaign through Lebanon, from which he took a large amount of cedar timber to build the sacred ship of the god Amun. Among King Thutmose IV's campaigns was the campaign that he carried out against Nubia, where a revolution broke out there, and Thutmose IV was able to defeat his enemies. The spirit of peace, friendly relations and truce prevailed between King Thutmose IV and the kings of neighboring nations, and his relations with Syria witnessed major changes, resulted from the peaceful alliance between the Egyptians and the kingdom of Mitanni. And the alliance ended with the royal diplomatic marriage between Thutmose IV and the daughter of the king of Mitanni. After the death of Thutmose IV, his son Amenhotep III assumed power. His era was characterized by peace with the surrounding countries. Amenhotep III was not fond of fighting affairs, and only wanted to maintain the situation that was left to him by his predecessors. He also faced a few disturbances, such as what happened in the 5th year during his rule in Nubia, where a revolution took place in the town of Abhat, which was located after the Second Cataract, and Amenhotep III succeeded in suppressing this rebellion. After that, he expanded his kingdom until he reached the 4th Cataract. Another revolution took place in a town located after the 2nd Cataract, and Nubia had self-administration under the supervision of the king's son in Kush. So Amenhotep III sent his deputy in the south and the king's son to suppress that revolution, and most of the period of his rule was characterized by stability and prosperity. It can be said that the enthusiasm and attention exerted by the previous king of Amenhotep III in the fierce wars was exploited by him in designing the buildings with which he wanted to decorate his country and in increasing the richness of God's temples. Amenhotep III was fond of building, art, architecture, and construction. So he was interested in restoring the monuments of his ancestors from the kings. He left behind immortal monuments. The most important monuments are his 2 statues, which were known as the Colossi of Memnon. Some attribute the discovery of America to Amenhotep III, as the latter was famous for his journeys and exploratory missions across the seas, which were called voyages of research and knowledge. He sent his famous expeditions equipped with sturdy sea soldiers and scholars. His first voyage went out to trace the sun in its orbit and its path towards the west across the White Sea, until it reached the shore of the Atlantic Ocean. It was the first naval fleet in the history of mankind to descend to the shore of the Atlantic. After the death of Amenhotep III, his son Amenhotep IV, known as Akhenaten, took over the rule of the country. He moved the capital from Thebes to a new town called Akhenaten, and its location is now in Tel El Amarna. Akhenaten was a peaceful king and a quiet philosopher, devoted to a religious call close to the message of monotheism. He disbelieved in the god Amun and called for the worship of one god, which is the sun disk, or it is known as the god Atun, thus becoming the first to call for monotheism in ancient Egypt. As a result of this, some sanctified him and gave him the status of prophets, while many rejected his call, and unrest spread in the country amidst his preoccupation with his new idol from the affairs of the country and the government. Egypt became in the range of enemies lurking in it, and the country also suffered from internal unrest due to the increasing power of the nobles and the conspiracy of the priests. and their persistent efforts to get rid of Akhenaten and restore the worship of Amun. Akhenaten refused to confront all of this. He preferred peace and tranquility, and Egypt began to lose its foreign possessions. During his reign, the Hittites stirred up strife in Syria, seized control of its northern cities, destroyed many cities in Phoenicia and Palestine, and deterioration spread to the outskirts of the state. The religious revolution continued until Akhenaten died in mysterious circumstances, and his son Tutankhamun, who was 9 years old, took over after him. He carried out many important actions. The most important action was that he returned to the traditional capital of Thebes, restored the worship of the god Amun, and worked to calm the religious revolution, which was established during the reign of his father. He also repaired the statues and columns of the Karnak temple, created the sacred boats, and built the palace of Al-Sanin on the west bank. Tutankhamun's death came after 10 years of his rule, when he was exercising one day in the desert of Memphis. He fell from his war chariot and injured his leg. He died shortly afterward from his wounds, leaving no heirs to the throne. The minister Ai, who married Tutankhamun's widow, assumed power after him, thus becoming king of the country, where his reign lasted for 4 years, during which he succeeded in suppressing the religious revolution and calming the internal situation in Egypt. He also made some additions to the Karnak temple, usurped the funerary temple of King Tutankhamun on the western coast of Luxor, and dug a rock temple for the god Min in Akhmim. He built a temple in Jabal al-Shams in Upper Nubia, a palace in Memphis, and finally his tomb at the entrance of the Valley of Kings. After the death of Ai, army commander Horemheb, the last king of the 18th dynasty, took over the power. He was able to restore stability to Egypt after a period of chaos. He struck with an iron hand at the hands of the corruptors in the state and restored stability to the country. Horemheb was the first to enact legislation and laws to regulate public life in history, as he was concerned with issuing many laws that regulate the relationship between the citizen and the ruling authority. Horemheb began a comprehensive series of internal reforms to prevent the misuse of power, eliminated the privileges that were in the hands of a small number of officials, and restored centralization and prestige to the state. He restored discipline to the government administration, appointed judges, restored local religious authorities, and divided power in governing Upper Egypt and the Delta between ministers from Thebes and Memphis, respectively. King Horemheb chose his distinguished military leader, Ramses, to succeed him on the throne of Egypt, thus opening a new page in the history of Egypt, which was the period of Ramesside rule. We hope that you liked the content. We would like also to ask you to support the channel by subscribing and activating all notifications. Atlas Documentary Channel, reliable sources and information.